Okay, we're here. We're alive. Welcome to another edition of the Edlow Podcast. Subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. It is late and a little disheveled. Here's a mess. That's okay. I'm fine. Um, yeah, so this is the next Just Me. Really like doing these ones. One, because I don't have to worry about scheduling with another guest. That's nice. But then also, I get to field questions from people who have supported the podcast, and I really appreciate those people who have. There's many of you, and I'm grateful. And we got a lot of different questions this time. Some on the topic that I posted on social media. If you want to follow the podcast, you can do so on Facebook and Instagram. I technically am on TikTok, but I just haven't been using it. Same with Twitter. I don't know. I only got so much social media in me, I suppose. But you can follow me or the podcast on Instagram at Edlow_podcast and on Facebook at Edlow Podcast. If you want to get updates on questions that are asked for these Just Me podcasts, and then also information when new guests come on. And of course, you can just subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever. So there's my pitch. We got a lot of cool questions. Some from some eager wrestling fans, which I appreciate. Some from some church people. I think we are a little more church themed this time. Just so you know, and this is where we're going to kind of end the podcast. There's some random Q&A here. But the question that I posed on social media was one that I've been thinking about for a very long time. And that is, how do you receive personal revelation from God? How do you know it's coming from God and not necessarily just your own thoughts? And then how do you have the faith to carry that, to act on that prompting when it doesn't necessarily make sense to you in some way? Okay. We'll get to that a little bit later. I'll recap that a little bit later. Let's get to some of the basic questions I've received so far. We'll start with some wrestling questions. So who is your favorite NorCal wrestler and why is it not Trip Rogers? Hashtag it's a onesie. So actually Trip Rogers is probably one of, if not my favorite NorCal wrestler right now. But a couple people that I really like, I got to say, if there's somebody, there's a few people I really like. I love Alpha Zoe. I think he's great. Some of the older guys, I love anytime Johnny Butabi or El Chupacabra is in the ring, they're great. Alex Ace is a fantastic big man. Doc Atrocity is always interesting to watch. And of course, the twins, the Stoner brothers, they're great. And you can't go wrong with guys like Lester, Lester the Legend. But one guy that's really stuck out to me, who I really, really have enjoyed watching from day one, has been Jaya Jewel. The guy he gets it. He can have a great match with everybody. He just went to Japan. Look him up if you haven't watched him. He is just absolutely fantastic. So Jaya is kind of my favorite guy right now. I'm really excited to watch where he goes from here. So let's see. How many times has Magnum AD chopped the crap out of you, and why did you enjoy it? It's been many. Sometimes not always in the ring. No, I do enjoy it because it's snug. It looks real because it is real. I just, he literally is, I think, the first guy I met in NorCal wrestling. We came up together. It was him and then Justin Caden, who runs Next Level Pro. Those were like the first two guys I ever met. And so it's just cool to be in the ring with Derevko like that. And so, that's why it's a lot of fun. Let's see. My favorite guest you've had on is Magnum AD. You should have him on more. Oh, gee, I wonder who posted that. It's funny. I actually recorded it. It'll end up in the lost the lost episodes. We did a whole episode where Magnum came on. We talked for about 2 hours. I think he'd had a little too much to drink, and he was really shooting hard on a bunch of people. And we later decided maybe that's not one we want to post. So that's one that I'm going to have to share a link to a few guys just so they have some blackmail on him. That was a fun one. Let's see. How many female talents have hit on you? I don't think anyone has. They're all just very professional, very fun. I haven't been around a ton of female talents, just a few, but they're all really good. They're all really good. There was a while where here at NorCal we really lacked female wrestlers. There were only a couple that were worth their payout, and now there's a ton. There's a lot that are doing just really great, and so but no, I'm not going to call anyone out who've hit on me, but if they did, I didn't notice. Let's see. When are you coming back to ACW? We miss booing you. That'll remain to be seen. We'll see when I get back in. I don't want to spoil anything, but one day maybe I'll show up. We'll just have to see. All right, let's see. Next, we'll switch from the wrestling ones. Well, we'll just keep going through wrestling ones, and then we'll get to some of the other ones we have here. Okay. If you had to pick a tag team partner of someone active in the indie scene, who would you pick? I assume you mean NorCal indie. I would love to do a tag team match with Trip Rogers. I'd love to do one with Johnny Butabi. I would love to tag with him. I'd love to tag with Jaya. I think he's great. I would love to be just like Jaya's bodyguard or something for a while. That'd be a lot of fun. I think it'd be fun to do the same thing for guys like, I know JMM just stopped wrestling, so that wouldn't have been. I thought that would be a cool one, and I would actually like. There's a lot of guys I'd love to tag with and do some fun stuff with. So everybody's just so good right now. Everybody's just really doing. NorCal's in a good spot right now. I really think so. Have you told Joe DeSoul you love him lately? It's been a while since I've seen Joe, but next time I see him, I will be for sure to tell him I love him, because I do love him. He's a fantastic guy. Why is Johnny Butabi your hero? Because he's done more with one hand than a lot of people do with two. I mean, that guy he's been on the podcast, shared his story, and he is quite the impressive guy. If you get a chance to listen to it, you should. That's not just a plug for my podcast. It's super inspiring to see what he has been able to do, and so cool to see him finally and kind of settle down in a good relationship with somebody he really cares about, and just having fun. So good guy, really one of my favorites. If I ever ran a wrestling show again, he'd be booked on it for sure. Did Joseph Smith go to the same school a young Maynard Skinner taught at? No. Joseph Smith isn't old enough to have gone to that school that Maynard Skinner taught at. Maynard's a little bit too old for him. So there you go. What is your opinion of ACW World Champion Christina Von Eerie? I'd love to have her on the podcast. I think she's got a cool story herself. I think she's great. I don't think she gets the credit she deserves. She's done a lot of stuff in this business and worked all over the world. I mean, she's done a lot of cool stuff. She was Global Force Wrestling champion for a long time, and she's gotten looks at a lot of places. And we're lucky to have the women around here who are trying to break into the business are really lucky to have her around to teach them, because I think she's been everywhere. and she could teach you what to do and what not to do. She's seen it all. So every time I've seen her, she's been excellent. She's been just a total professional. Just really like her a lot. I think she's great. So, okay. Who in the wrestling business is your favorite person to just hang out with at shows or like a steakhouse? So Derevko is kind of the guy who is probably like the guy I hang out with the most. I love Dave Dutra. I don't get to see Dave as much as I would prefer. Dave is such a good guy and such a good wrestling talent. He's awesome. And I like hanging out. I mean, there's so many guys like, again, like I remember just going out to a Denny's with like Mike Rain, Johnny, and Derevko is just such a treat when we all get together. I mean, and Riv, I like hanging out with Riv. I've hung out with Riv a bunch, and Jesus Cruz. There's just a lot of guys out there, but my favorite guy, my favorite guy actually, if I'm going to say anybody who is, he's not technically in the business anymore. He's gone away, but he's kind of gone the way away from the business is Oliver John. Like anytime I go to lunch or dinner with him, it's going to be a 3-hour deal. He just is so great. So that's another one. Those are the wrestling questions. We got through them pretty quick. All right. Some of the other random questions that came through before we get to the the main course here. Thoughts on crypto? Is it a good investment? I've never invested in cryptocurrencies. I don't understand it. I don't understand blockchain stuff. I think it's speculative. It seems also like crypto is used for a lot of unsavory things, which I don't necessarily like. My investment strategy is to invest in things I understand and things that I believe will continually make money. I also don't really tend to invest in anything that doesn't give a dividend. Very rarely will I invest in something that doesn't have a dividend. And the reason for that, it just doesn't make sense to me. Like when you buy a stock that doesn't have a dividend, you don't make any money until you sell it. So you're buying it with the intention of you're hoping someone will buy it for more later, which is any investment. But I prefer a dividend because that means you make money just by holding it. So most of my stuff are blue chip stocks that have a long history of giving dividends at a good rate, 3% or higher usually. And then I reinvest those dividends to make more money. And cryptocurrency doesn't really do that. I don't know if there's like an ETF out there for crypto that does, but I couldn't imagine there's any out there that do that. My opinion on investing in general is, I've never jumped on a fad. So like when all that Robinhood stuff was going on with GameStop, I didn't jump on that. When Tesla was blowing up, I didn't jump on that. When, crypto was going, doubling its money, I didn't jump on that. I am a long-term investor, kind of in the Warren Buffett style, whereas I don't invest any money that I need in the next 3 years. I make sure all my, I wouldn't invest anything if you have any high interest debt. I just, so everything I have, it's like Apple, AT&T, Bank of America. I have Energy Transfer, Chevron, and a whole host of others that are just good, long history of making money stocks. And it's worked well for me. I've done pretty well. Trump or Kamala? Neither. I'm not going to vote for either one of them. I've had arguments with people on both sides about this, if you're not voting for us, then you're voting for them. And I don't believe any of that. And look, I don't vote against people. I vote for people. I can't stomach voting for Kamala or Donald Trump for different reasons. Donald Trump for probably obvious reasons. Kamala Harris, I've met twice. I've been to a couple of her events, and I know people who've worked for her, and I just have my own personal reasons. If you want to hear those reasons, you should probably go to YouTube and hear Tulsi Gabbard, debating her back in 2020, and that would pretty much, explain it for you. Because the thing about politicians in general, and I think we all agree on this, is that a lot of the times they don't tell you what they really mean and what they really believe. They're just telling you whatever they have to get elected, and I believe that's kind of the way she is. And so I can't vote for her. Don't know who I'm going to vote for yet, but neither one of them. So let's see. Any TV shows you've been binging lately? So, I wouldn't say I've been binging, but the new season of Tulsa King came out, and I've watched both of those episodes. I do like Tulsa King. I don't think I don't know if it's worth. Like, I have Paramount Plus. I don't know if I would necessarily pay for Paramount Plus just for Tulsa King, although it is my favorite show on Paramount Plus. I think that also I don't know if I'd watch that show if it wasn't for the fact that Sylvester Stallone is on it. He's very good in it. Look it up. Tulsa King is basically Sylvester Stallone. He is in the mob. He spent 25 years in prison, taking the fall for a mob boss. And then when he gets out, they send him to Tulsa, Oklahoma to start earning. And so it's a pretty, I like it. I think it's good. Writing could be better. Don't expect Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul, but it's an entertaining watch. So I've been watching that. And then I did recently jump into Love is Blind. I mean, it was fine. I prefer Married at First Sight. I think there's a lot more room for train wrecks on that show. My first thought every time I watch one of those episodes of Love is Blind is I would never go on the show. I think this is the worst idea I could think of. But anyhow, it was fine. It was good. But those have been the ones that lately, my son has been enjoying, Austin has been enjoying The Penguin. My girls have been watching that new Marvel Agatha, whatever. I haven't heard like fantastic reviews on either one of those, so we'll see. I don't know. If anyone's got recommendations, send them my way. How is Brother Brigham doing? Brother Brigham is fine. He's just, taking a little break. You'll see, I'm sure you'll see him down the line at some point. Let's see. Do you have any pet peeves with church culture? All right, so there's a few of these that are kind of, I don't know, church questions before we get to the meat of what I was talking about. So do you have any pet peeves with church culture? Yeah, there are some, I don't know if I'd call them pet peeves, but there are things in the culture that I do find problematic. And I think everybody's got a few of those things. Recently, I think the one thing that, I don't know if I call it a pet peeve, but things that I've noticed recently that bother me is, I think a lot of the times we go into these lessons, whether it be Elders Quorum Relief Society or Gospel Doctrine, and questions are asked, and people tend to parrot the same answers over and over and over. And some people might say, well, that's because those same answers are what we need to hear. And that's fine, sure. But I think what I mean is I don't really like the superficial. I feel like sometimes people just give superficial, artificial answers, more like they're pontificating rather than being vulnerable and honest about what their life experience really is like. So, like, there seems to be kind of some things that are traits or characteristics of members of the church in the way that they speak in these lessons that are, like I said, they're just a little superficial. Like they're not really getting to the meat of things. And I wish we would get more vulnerable and honest about what we're doing. In fact, I'll tell you this story. We had an elders quorum lesson just a few weeks ago that was really great, and the guy who taught the lesson, he came in, and I think I got to credit him for this. It's really interesting because he is not kind of your standard member of the church. Him and his wife, his wife is not a member. Very nice lady. I've met her a few times, but just not a member of the church. She goes to her own church, and he goes with her to her church and then comes to ours. And so he gets kind of a couple of different, flavors of the gospel. And what I think was really interesting is he came in and he was talking about prayer. And he said, okay, we're going to break up into groups. We're going to break into groups of 4. And we're going to talk for about 5 minutes about what each of us need in our group. And we're going to pray for each other for that thing that we need. And it was kind of awkward because it's like, I don't know if I want these people knowing, what I necessarily need right now. I don't know if I want to share this with these guys. But as we all got to sharing, it actually ended up being a great experience. And so, yeah, that was kind of against the grain. But then we had another one where it seemed like, they were kind of basic questions and then basic answers. And I wish we had a little bit more of that, a little bit more of the vulnerability and honesty. But maybe that's maybe I'm the one that needs to be the change there, right? Maybe I'm the one that's not being so vulnerable and honest. So we'll see. Okay, let's see. I got a couple more here. Do you think that dating in the church is the best thing? Do you think that dating outside the church is a bad thing? Dating within the church doesn't necessarily mean you're dating a good person. Okay. Now, do I think that dating in the church is the best thing? Yes. Do you think that dating outside of the church is a bad thing? No. Dating within the church doesn't necessarily mean you're dating a good person. Right. To expound on that, you can definitely find a good person outside of the church. I'll tell you, as the son of a family where one of the parents was not a member of the church when they got married. My dad was not a member up until I think I was 4 when he got baptized, converted when I was 17. And, my mom and dad are still together to this day. But I think if you cornered my mom and asked her, I think that she would probably tell you that it is best to date within the church. And I think the reason for that is, listen, good people everywhere, right? But I think when you date someone within the church, and what I mean by that is someone who actually holds to the same standards as you, it makes for continuity in the home. So, if you date within the church and you're somebody who's devout, you're not necessarily going to have the same conversations about, to compromise on whether or not alcohol is in the house, or whether it's okay for your family member to, your spouse to go out with their friends and do things that you don't, necessarily believe in, right? Now, that's not to say that you can't find somebody who will respect your beliefs and your boundaries if they're not a member, but that's a little bit harder, right? And so, again, I think if you're asking me, do I think it is the best thing? I think it is the best thing if you want to keep to a certain standard and make sure that who you're dating also has that standard. I think it's the easiest way. But I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing if you fall in love with somebody outside of the church and you can make it work. And I do agree that, look, like there are a lot of people in the church who will tell you that they follow certain standards or whatever, and then that turns out not to be true. There are bad people everywhere. I don't know if I want to say bad people, but there are people who have weaknesses and struggle everywhere. So yeah, I don't know if that's helpful, or you were looking for something different. That's just my opinion on it. So here's the next one. With the world getting as bad as it is, how do you keep your kids on the straight and narrow? I mean, the jury's still out on my kids, right? They're all very good kids. I'm joking. Um, I think for my kids, I teach them correct principles and let them govern themselves. And I take opportunities because there are a lot of people in my life who are from all sorts of different um, backgrounds and different moral views, different things. Some within my own family. I have a lot of diverse religions and beliefs in my family that some are real wild, some are just different. And I make sure to teach my kids that everybody around them is an example in your life, some good and some bad. And I think that every person in their life has both good qualities and bad qualities that they need to observe. And you take the good that you see from people and you implement it, and the bad and you stay away from it. So if you, for example, have somebody in your family who is not following certain moral standards, and you look at their life and you see where they're at, you'd ask yourself, is that the kind of life you want? Not to say that it's good or bad, but you just have to look at that. And so I look at I use that as kind of a learning tool, and so far it's worked really well. So yeah, everyone in your life can be an example of either what to do or what not to do, and we're really all examples of both. Um, but I got to tell you, when you say with the world getting as bad as it is, I don't necessarily think it's that bad. I think it's just different, right? Like, what is it exactly that you think is so bad? I mean, if you look at the statistics, murder across the world is down. Human trafficking is down. Kidnapping, down. People living in poverty, down. People living in democracies, up. More people with access to drinking water than ever before. More options for women than ever before. I got to tell you, my daughters, I don't know if I'd want my daughters to grow up in any other generation than right now. I mean, like the amount of options that they have. There are more women going to college now than ever before. There are more women with more options than ever before. They have more rights than ever before. They have a greater voice in the government here in the US than they ever have before. I mean, there is a female, like her or not, there's a female running for president for the second time right now, who was a vice president, right? That's pretty amazing. And I think it's also pretty good that right now people are more accepting in and out of the church of different lifestyles. It is much more widely accepted for women to have careers in the church, and there are more leadership opportunities in the church than there used to be. The way that they use the priesthood themselves is taught in a more clear and coherent way than ever before. So, I think that's a good thing. And I recently heard in a lesson, actually, and I heard someone say they talked about our cell phones, and they were like, I think because a lot of people think, yeah, there's pornography on cell phones and it's a big problem. you know, um, they looked at the phone and said, "This phone is evil," right? And I just was like, "The phone is evil? Like, really?" You mean that phone that I was able to use on top of the Eiffel Tower to respond to emails of my law clerk so that I could continue to work while I was on vacation in Paris? You mean this phone that has my family tree on an app that goes back generations, or this phone that has my patriarchal blessing in it and my grandparents who are deceased patriarchal blessings and my great grandparents patriarchal blessings and my great great grandfather's patriarchal blessings? You mean that phone that allows me to pay my tithing so that I don't have to fill out a tithing slip and forget and have to put a check in a thing and hand it to somebody? It makes it easier for those people who are already taxed on this volunteer job of a bishopric. They don't have to sit there for hours and count tithing money. Uh, you know, this phone that has more gospel resources in it at the gospel library app than any church library in any building that I've ever attended church in. So it's like, yeah, sure. Is social media a problem? Maybe for some. Is there an issue with pornography on phones and the internet? Yes. Are we inundated with negative stuff? Yes, that's true. But there's so many good things too. I think we're doing okay. And I got to tell you, I think our kids are more equipped to handle that stuff than any other generation before. I've had the opportunity to teach the 16 to 18-year-old class. I did it for a couple of years. And I was, knowing what my class was like, I was not excited about it because we were really difficult. And these kids were A plus. I mean, several missionaries, boys and girls, all went out and served, are now married in the temple. Like a great group who were so much more spiritual and well prepared than I ever was. So I think everything's going to be fine. Relax, okay? We're in good hands. We're okay. And this next generation, as they come up and they take the reins of the church, I'm really excited to see where it goes. I really am. So, okay, I think that is it for all of the Q&A part. Let's get to the meat and potatoes of what I asked for. So let me recap. So the question that I posed on Facebook and Instagram and various social media outlets was, how is it that you receive revelation from God? And how is it that you know you're receiving revelation from God as opposed to your own thoughts? And then how is it that you have the faith to carry that out when it doesn't necessarily make logical sense to you? The way I've described it recently, and this is a particularly LDS uh, reference that people are going to understand. But it's really easy to follow personal revelation when it's something that you probably would do on your own anyway. It is much harder when the revelation you're getting is to cut off Laban's head. So how do you know? How do you understand? And of course, not endorsing any sort of revelation that's killing people or anything like that. I was just using that as a reference from the Book of Mormon. You understand what I'm saying. Sometimes you get revelation that doesn't make sense, that maybe isn't something that you think necessarily that surprises you that you're getting. And how do you get the faith to carry that out? And I don't know if I got a lot of strong answers on that. But here is some of the things that people have said, and I'm going to keep this anonymous. Okay. So I think this is an answer to the last question, which was, how is it that, again, how is it that you have faith to follow? And it says, I just remember that God can do way more with my life than I can do on my own. So I remain faithful. So yes, that is a good way to look at it. um, I think that that's a good way to look at it when you're getting those promptings and encouraging yourself to, follow it. So sure. Um, okay, another one. I have found that often the feelings I have that are not my own are quite different from my own thoughts. They meet in my head and in my soul. They meet in my head and in my soul. So like your head and your soul maybe make sense at the same time. I don't know. Anyway, that does not necessarily mean it is easy to follow. I have found that following becomes easier the more I practice following. It doesn't really matter anymore whether it is me or the spirit. It is usually correct. Okay. So I think I understand that. I think I understand what you're saying. Essentially, what you're saying is that you know the more you follow the promptings, and the easier it becomes. And then does it really matter whether the prompting is coming from you or from God? Well, that is true for those ones that we were talking about. That is true for what we're talking about when it comes to those things that maybe make sense. But what if it's something that's drastically different, right? Than what makes sense to you? What then? Do you just, well, it doesn't matter if it's me or not, right? Because what if you're wrong? Anyhow. Okay, here is a long one. Let's see here. I have found that practice is the best way to learn to differentiate between the promptings of the Spirit and my own thoughts. I decided many years ago that I would simply act on every thought that could possibly be a prompting. As I did so, I learned to differentiate between my own thoughts and those that came directly from God. Often, when I receive a prompting, my whole body is filled with chills, so it has become very distinctive and easy to recognize. I never run short on words, but I don't believe that it's always beneficial to share everything I think, and so I've made a practice, in church specifically, of only sharing those things that the Lord prompts me to share. This way, I know that when I share, it is for the benefit of someone else rather than to draw attention to myself, which serves no purpose. I have a funny story about following a prompting that seems outlandish. I was the Relief Society president of my singles ward at the time, and I was sitting in sacrament meeting on a fast Sunday. I was prompted to bear my testimony by singing, "I Know That My Redeemer Lives." I'm a vocalist, but still, I was mortified. Can you imagine anything more cliche and cringe than someone bearing their testimony in song in a singles ward? But God told me to, and I knew it. So I stood up and I began my testimony by explaining that I pray that the Lord will guide me and give me promptings. And if I intend for those promptings to continue, I'm obligated to act upon them when they come. I then said that I had been prompted to share a song. I sang the song and sat down. Months later, I was sharing this experience with a friend at work. This was when I was a restaurant manager and about the time that I met you. Oh, okay. When I finished speaking with him, one of my employees pulled me aside. She was one of the sisters in my Relief Society. I had hired her to work for me after I found out that she was drinking with friends at her previous job and getting into trouble. I believe she was 19 years old at the time. She told me that I had sung the song for her. It was her favorite hymn, and she hadn't felt the Spirit in a very long time. When I began to sing, her body filled with the Spirit and brought her out of a dark place. She said it was a turning point for her spiritually. Several months later, she died in a car accident. When she passed, she had reconciled her life to God. I believe that my willingness to follow that prompting played a small role in helping her find her way back to peace and light. Well, that is awesome. Well, good luck following that, everybody else who responded. That is an amazing story. It really is. That is a great example of exactly what's going on here. I don't know if I necessarily get big tingly feelings. You know, I think that there are a handful of times in your life when like you get a spiritual prompting and you know it, you know, Um, like I think somewhere in the culture of the church, there's become this idea that I must know in the moment that it is a spiritual impression, that I must receive that spiritual impression so that it will guide me to tell me what to do. And unless I receive that spiritual impression, I won't know what to do. But like, you know, I think that that's rare. I think it's really rare that you like receive a spiritual impression um, that you know you're receiving before the fact. Um, so I think the majority of the spiritual impressions that you're going to receive, you won't even know it's a spiritual impression. I'll tell you a story from my life too. I think I've shared the story on the podcast before, but regardless. So one time, it was I can't remember if it was Thanksgiving or Christmas. I think it was Thanksgiving, but I had gotten together with some friends to play basketball, and Austin and Piper were really young at the time. They were like 5 and 3, right? And I took them with me to the basketball game, and I bought them some donuts and I had them sit on the stage while we played basketball for like an hour and a half or two, and they were running around the church. And by the time we were done, they were just wired on sugar. They were like so wired. And so I grabbed them, I throw them in the car. And on the way back from basketball, my mom had called me, and I called her back and she said, "Hey, I need you to go over to Rite Aid and pick up some stuff for dinner tonight." And I go, yeah, that's fine. So I go to Rite Aid, which is right down the street from the church, and I go in there. And I mean, Austin and Piper were just on, like they were just on one. I mean, just touching everything, running up and down the aisles. Just, can I get ice cream? Can I get it? No, leave me alone. And then I look down the aisle and I see this this guy I've known since he was a youth, and I hadn't seen him in church in years. And he was sitting there, and he was with a lady, and I was like, I should probably go and talk to him. But like I said, I had these two crazy kids that were just yelling, screaming, running around, and I just was like, you know what? I do not have time to say hi. Let's just break out and whatever. And so I leave. And so fast forward to the next Sunday, and sitting in ward council, and as I'm sitting there in ward council, um, they asked if anybody had a quote unquote missionary moment they wanted to share. And another lady came to, said, I actually have a missionary moment. This last Friday, I was at work, and guess who came into my work? Same guy. And she goes, I said, hi, how are you doing? He said, good. And I said, man, we miss you. And he goes, it's interesting because lately I have been thinking about coming back to church. It's so interesting that I saw you here. What time does the church start? I'd like to start coming back. And he was going to come on Sunday. And I was like, oh man, it was not a coincidence that I saw him there. Now, obviously it still worked out. He saw someone else. He came to church that Sunday. So God got his work accomplished, but I missed the opportunity to be a part of it. And so, now did I think that was necessarily a spiritual prompting at the time? No, I didn't. I just thought, oh, there he is, and I went around my day. So I think a lot of our spiritual impressions are like that. So, okay. A few more responses. Let's see. It says, when it comes to receiving spiritual promptings, it's usually the route I'm trying to avoid or that one thing I'm trying to skip over that just keeps popping up in my mind. If I'm being extra stubborn, he'll use other people or specific music, movies, etc. to push me. But once I decide to follow, there is a clarity and calmness that comes over me. And then I think this has to do with the faith part. A lot of praying and talking to God, remembering everything he's brought me through and is now walking through with me. There is a peace and happiness fulfillment that comes after following him, especially when it doesn't make sense. Thank you. That's really helpful. Appreciate it. And then another one that came through. Let me see if I can get to this one. I decipher the difference between personal revelation from thoughts by how it feels. Does it feel natural? Does it bring peace? Is there a comfort about it, regardless if it's new or scary? Feelings are important. Faith to go through with it is all a part of the process. Trust the process. No matter what, it will end in good. Even if it, quote unquote, fails, you learned from it, gained experience, had opportunity to grow, so forth. It doesn't mean I might not complain when I tried something and maybe it didn't work out like I thought it would. However, I try and remind myself that it will make sense later and do the best I can with what I have. Hindsight is 2020. Yeah, that's the thing that's really interesting is it's really easy to Monday morning quarterback a lot of the decisions that are made with this stuff. Like there's been a lot of times in my life when I've looked back and I should have made certain decisions based on promptings I received that didn't make sense. And it's really easy now to look back and go, hey, idiot, you really should have done that. You would have avoided a lot of pain. But, when you're in the moment, it's like, every time I have a situation where I run through a trial or I get a prompting that doesn't make sense or there's something that happens that's uncomfortable, I always come out the same. Like I come out better than I was before. Yet for some reason, even though that has been the case almost every single time, when I get into another trial or I have another one of these promptings, I still struggle with the same thing. And maybe that's why it keeps happening. Maybe it keeps happening because I'm not learning the lesson, right? I'll share another story that has to do with impressions that I received. There was a specific, I'm going to try to be as vague as I can. I've kind of shared a piece of this story, but not all on a different podcast. But there was a specific time in my life a few years back that things were just not going my way. I've been, some things that happened outside of my control, that affected me emotionally, and then other things that happened to me outside of my control that actually affected me physically. At the time, I had been either going to school full-time and working full-time or building a law practice and serving in significant church callings for the better part of 15 years. But despite all that, the acts of others kind of led me into this pretty significant emotional and mental state. And so, that was compounded by some health challenges that affected my ability to work the hours that I had previously worked for a time. And so at this time, I was really struggling. And after a specific doctor's appointment that didn't seem like it was really, was having to do with some health issues. I got really upset, and I just kind of looked around and I was just like, everything's falling apart. Right. And it was another one of those moments, and I've had a few of them in my life, and I'm sure we all have. I was like, it just doesn't make sense. Like, why is this happening to me right now? Right. I mean, I've been an elders quorum president. I've been in a bishopric. I've been on the high council. Like I magnify all my callings. I do my home teaching or ministering, or whatever you call it. I always have. I've paid my tithing. I went on a mission. I served in the church. I did all these things, and I just don't understand why these things are happening to me, right? It didn't make a lot of sense. And it was a real dark time. And when the things were the darkest, I remember I got on my knees. I was alone in my bedroom and I got on my knees and I prayed. And in speaking with God, I I remember asking something to the effect of, um, you know, I don't know what you expect me to do. Everything seems so out of my control. What am I supposed to do? And in that moment, a scripture came to mind, and this is from the Book of Mormon in Second Nephi, chapter 2, and at verse 26. And it says, "And the Messiah cometh in the fullness of times, that he may redeem the children of men from the fall. And because that they are redeemed from the fall, they have become free forever, knowing good from evil, to act for themselves and not to be acted upon." To act for themselves and not to be acted upon. And that really stuck with me. To act for themselves and not to be acted upon. And I just kept hearing a voice in my head that said, you need to act. And I was like, well, what is that even supposed to mean? Right? Like, I don't even know what that means. Act what? Right? I mean, I'm already doing all the things. And so I started thinking about it. I was like, okay, so everything seems out of control. Okay, let's start thinking about things I can control. What are some things I can control? And it just came to my mind. It was like, you can control what you put in your body, right? Like, you're kind of eating like garbage. I was at my heaviest weight. I mean, like I said, I've been working and going to school full time or working a bunch for 15 years, and so fast food was a big part of my life, and a lot of junk food, and there was a lot of stress eating. Reese's eggs were a big part of my diet. So was easy cheese, fills the cracks of the heart, if you know what I mean. And so I was like, okay, so we can fix what we put in our body, right? So I got an app, I downloaded it, and I started working on my macros, and I started losing weight and started feeling a little bit better, and I was like, all right, what else can I do? Well, you can control how much you exercise, right? So I started just going 3 times a week to the gym, and I started just, doing an elliptical machine for like 10, 15 minutes, whatever I could do some free weights on a bench, just a few sets. And then slowly over time, doing a little bit more and a little bit more, feeling a little bit better. And what I noticed there was then, um, my mental health started feeling better as I went to the gym. And then as I lost weight, I was like, you know what? I haven't gotten any clothes for a while. I probably need some new clothes. So I bought some new clothes. And then it was like, let's Google and see, like, what are some things I can do to help my confidence and the way I kind of show up in the world. And there were little things that I could do, like stand up straight, look people in the eye, smile, you know, uh, you know, dress appropriately, and by appropriately, I mean, like, dress up a little bit, make yourself look good, make yourself smell good, and those little things gave me confidence, and I noticed myself becoming happier. And then I said, okay, what are some other things I can do? Well, I can control where I put my time and energy. I don't have to put my time and energy in negative things. What are some of the positive things I can do? And I said, let's start fostering the relationships that are most important. And I started focusing on my kids. And that's when daddy-daughter dates and father-son outings came along. That's when the breakfast idea came along. Every Sunday morning, we're going to do breakfast. Yeah, during the week, it's too busy for us to put up to good meals. But every Sunday morning, we know that we're all here, and anybody who wants to come and help make breakfast can, and those who don't are doing dishes. And everybody wanted to help. And so, and those kind of experiences made me closer to my kids. Now, that is a very small thing. I don't know if that truly was a prompting or not. I don't know if that was just me thinking or if that was a prompting, but either way, it was pretty life changing. Now I go to the gym 6 days a week. still occasionally fill the cracks of the heart with Easy Cheese and Reese's and other kind of junk food. And, I like to eat, become a big fan of sushi. But it's been life changing. And I've had many other experiences where the Spirit has told me that things are going to work out. And they have. And they continue to. Not on my timeline necessarily, but they do. And so I'm grateful for everybody who has responded. I think the message that, as I was thinking about this and studying this and hearing you guys send messages, there's one overarching theme that comes from this, and that is everybody who kind of responded said the same thing, which was the miracle came after the test of their faith. So we are taught that we are supposed to press forward with a steadfastness in Christ. That's what we hear in the scriptures. I think the answer here is when you get a prompting, whether you're not sure or whether you are sure that it is a prompting or it is not, press forward. You're definitely not doing the Lord's will by sitting still and doing nothing. So if you get that prompting, even if it doesn't make sense, if you feel it and it keeps coming, act, press forward. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But at least you gave it your all. Friends, this has been awesome. I hope you stuck with me for the hour. Thanks for everybody who sent messages. I love it. For those of you who have listened, subscribe, please. The more, the merrier. We got some more exciting ones coming up. We've had a great month. I mean, I got to interview John O'Hurley, Ellen Dubin, Sean Kanan. I mean, for those of you who don't know and you haven't listened, Ellen Dubin is the voice of Disneyland. And she was in Napoleon Dynamite. And she was absolutely wonderful with Lexi, who helped me interview her. Just great. And she continues, actually, her and Lexi have continued to email back and forth about acting. And it's been super helpful. Sean Kanan talking about Cobra Kai. He's actually become a good friend. And which is wild to me, that this podcast did that. And of course, John O'Hurley, Jay Peterman, the winner of Dancing with the Stars, like the host of Family Feud. He had so many wonderful things to say. Go back and listen. 30 minutes is all he gave me, and it was a great 30 minutes. So check those out. Subscribe. We got a bunch more fun stuff coming up. Feel free to comment on the on the YouTube. On the YouTube channel, if you have thoughts about what was said here, I'd love to hear them. This is a continuing discussion. I think this is something that people need to really listen to and think about more. One last thing, I know I'm droning on and on. One last thing I'll say. We talked a little bit about in our gospel doctrine class a couple weeks ago. How it wasn't quite the question, but it was kind of a thing of, well, when the prophet is speaking, how do we know that the prophet is speaking as a prophet as opposed to just his own thoughts and all these different things? And my response to that was, we've been hearing for a long, long time that personal revelation, learning and understanding personal revelation is the most important thing, and will be the most important thing in the coming days. And so I'm glad we had this discussion so that way we can learn to decipher. Grateful for you guys, grateful for everyone. Like I said, keep listening, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thanks.